What's the biggest bullet you've ever dodged? Years ago I was on a first meet for an internet date. We met at a bar and the bartender carded us. Even though we were both older, they were doing stings in the area, so he was carding every single person. Handed mine right over, but my date was an ass about it. The bartender checked mine and handed it back to me. He checked his, and rather than handing it back to him, he placed it on the bar right in front of me. It had the sexual offender stamp on it. The guy picked it up, looked at the bartender, looked at me, and then got up and walked out. I immediately googled him. He was on the registry and had been in prison for rape. Lesson learned. Always Google. The bartender and I are still friends. Grandma got a flat tire, pulled over. As she was on the side fixing the tire, her car was hit and totaled. Right from her hands. She was okay. Sold my bar and grill business in August 2019. This one just materialized yesterday, actually. About a year ago at my job I was offered to switch from my current team, where I was established for a few years, had seniority, etc. for a new department that just started to kick it off. Right processes. Basically start from square one. A lot more work for the same amount of pay. I figured fuck it and went. Yesterday they announced that they just closed the physical HQ office for my old department, and everyone in that entire part of the company would have to either move to one of 14 random states that we can't pick. It's chosen basically by a roulette wheel for where you're going, to a local office, or they are going to be fired on June 22nd. Thankfully, since I'm part of the new department, I wasn't included in that mandate. Phew. I was a teen driver not paying attention at an intersection at the crest of a hill with low visibility when the light turned green. The car behind me honked, and just as I was about to go, a truck barreled through the red light on the perpendicular road at decidedly ludicrous speed. If I had been paying attention and gone when the light turned green, I very likely would have been T-boned to death. Close street call I've ever had. I was working in an amusement park during college summers. I used to come home from college on a Friday afternoon and usually pick up a Friday shift as well as a full weekend during the month that the park was only open on weekends. I was a manager at my attraction. One particular Friday, I got home and was too exhausted to do a Friday night shift, so I bagged it and decided to just work the Saturday/Sunday and be back at school on Monday. I got a call from a good friend and coworker telling me that our attraction was in flames, there were casualties, and a couple of my friends and coworkers were missing. 7 people lost their lives. My coworker, assistant manager, went back in and pulled people out to safety. He was okay. I was in shock for a few days. Had I done what I usually do, I would have been there in charge, and I know I would have gone in to help. It could have been an entirely different situation. So yeah, I dodged a bullet, but a devastating event happened. I'll never know. I was out kayaking on a lake and several bullets whizzed by me. There was a distinct crack buzz sound as it went by. I think some people were just out plinking in their backyard, adjacent to the lake, and didn't think a backstop was necessary. This also happened to me a few weeks later, when I was paddling on a small stream. Bullets whizzed by above the bank, just over my head. I don't think anyone knew I was there either time. Regardless, when you go out and shoot stuff, make sure there's a backstop. FFS. Also, I don't know how big the bullets were, so I'm unsure which was the biggest bullet dodged. I matched with a guy on Tinder who played for the Atlanta Falcons. He was really charming and seemed nice. He asked me to fly down to Atlantic City for Memorial Day weekend, said he would pay for everything, airfare, hotel, food, etc. But I had never met him before, and he refused to give me his phone number. I was uncomfortable flying to meet a stranger, so I told him no. 2 weeks later he was on the news for kicking and killing his girlfriend's dog. I was booked on Pan Am Flight 103 which went down over Lockerbie, Scotland. I didn't have a premonition or anything supernatural. I just decided to cancel my seat. Didn't think anything of it until the plane went down, and my mother had written down my flight plan and reminded me. This was back in the day, when you could cancel without a penalty up to a couple of days in advance. Edit. You know, when I posted my response I didn't realize how many comments I would get that involved people who were impacted by this sad event. On any given day, we make decisions, for no concrete reason really, like I just chose not to go that day, and we come to learn it was a good decision. I try not to evaluate my decision, because I don't want to affect my future decisions by second guessing or trying to work the odds. This is only one example of times that I dodged a significant bullet. I wrote a different post, but erased it before I hit save. 2005, my friend and I evacuated New Orleans 2 days before Hurricane Katrina and drove to Mississippi with the little money we had. We were trying to decide on where to stay for the night, and it was between a mid-range hotel or the really cheap motel. Decided to spend a little more for the hotel. During the night the eye of the storm came through Mississippi and flattened the roof of the motel we decided against. I was subletting an apartment in college and got zapped by the electric stove. Gave notice immediately and moved out with very clear reasons why I was moving out. The building burnt a few weeks later. Edit. Well, this blew up. Thanks, kind Redditors. I took my wife to an indoor shooting range in 2014. I had been at this range many times, and safety was always their top priority. They made you sit through a safety video, take a quiz, and get a temporary certification before they allowed you onto the range. Place got really busy and their safety policy became less stringent as time went on. I noticed that the lane next to us had 3 people in it, already a violation. 2 big guys, and 1 tiny woman, probably her in 20s. They were handing her various firearms and laughing when she couldn't handle the recoil. Big violation there, and incredibly irresponsible. This girl was muzzle sweeping everyone. Another huge violation. I got a bad feeling. Told my wife to pack it up because we were leaving. As soon as we started walking away, bang, that girl had fired a round right where my wife was standing just a few seconds prior. I told the range officers that they needed to get in there and do something about those idiots and that we weren't coming back. I have only been to a range a few times since that happened, and now I don't even go at all. Too many idiots. Not me. A Dutch mate of mine living in Tasmania had to visit his sick mum in Amsterdam. Booking his flight online, he said to his wife, "You know, I'm sick of flying Malaysian Airlines. The food is shit, the hostess are miserable, it'll cost more, but I'm booking with Singapore." So, instead of dying on MH17, he was on a plane 40 kilometers ahead of it. Edit. Just to clarify, he was on way home from AMS. Physically, a bus. I grew up in Bermuda, and since it is such a small island, cars are limited to 1 per family, and everyone drives mopeds. I was driving into town, and came up to a red light behind a bus. As is tradition, I scooted around the bus, to be in the front of the line of traffic. Literally 2 seconds later a second bus smashed into the back of the first bus at like 30 miles per hour. I would have been pancaked. Without question, 100% dead. I just sat on the side of the road for a bit and thought about my mortality. Edit. Thank you for the awards. My only other Bermuda bus-based encounter was driving home from my first job in the rain. An oncoming bus in the opposite lane went through a massive puddle and sent what looked like a tidal wave of water right at me. It literally picked me and my little Yamaha V50 right up and swept us off the road onto some grass. So I guess in the end it was me. 1 bus is 1. I really needed a job and the manager at a dispensary in my area offered me a spot. I said no, and 4 days later they were raided and everyone got arrested. About 6 months after I left my ex, he got caught sexting a 12-year-old. He was 34 at the time. Edit. I had the wrong age. He was 34 when it started. By the time he was in jail he was 36. I got on an intercity bus and almost sat in the middle, but moved and sat at the back. The bus later collided with a truck and got opened up like a tin can. If I had sat where I originally intended I would have been killed. My ex-girlfriend moved out of my house a day before the first lockdown in Spain. She previously pulled a knife on me. I had 2 job offers in different states at the same time. The one I didn't take was offering more money, but I just didn't gel with the guy who would be my boss, and really liked the guy who would be my boss at the lower offer. The better offer was in a state I had always wanted to live in, for a company I admired, but something felt off, so I went with the lower offer. I ended up meeting my wife in the city of the lower offer. Meanwhile, the company that had given me the higher offer abruptly closed and laid off their entire staff with no severance, so if I had taken that I would have been stuck on the other side of the country with no job and no money. Attempted suicide. Ended up passing out in some bushes near the train station. Early the next morning, a girl I went to high school with, who I barely knew, saw me while she was boarding the train for a college interview early in the morning. She recognized me and told the conductor. He dismissed me as a junkie who just needed to sleep it off. She said, "I know him. He does not do drugs or drink. Call 911 now. 3 days in a coma. etc. etc. I'm very grateful." Edit. I expected this to be an into the other cathartic post that would go fully ignored. Thank you for showing your humanity, internet. I promise to update when things come together. Was driving on a freeway in the right lane when there was a sudden traffic jam ahead. I slammed on my brakes and was about to swerve onto the shoulder when I noticed that I wasn't sure the semi behind me could stop, and I didn't know how long we actually had a shoulder. Construction was happening at the time. Made the decision to rear-end the car in front of me to stay off the shoulder. The truck went onto the shoulder, brakes squealing, and finally managed to stop when the back tires of their trailer were level with me. Good thing we weren't in a center lane, and that we happened to have a shoulder at that moment. As a bonus, I stopped in time and didn't hit the car in front of me after all, though I would have happily taken that hit, and hopefully only would have shook up the people in front of me, in place of literally being hit by a truck. A few months ago I was driving on I-80 at night when out of nowhere the biggest buck I'd ever seen is in the middle of my lane. I did exactly what you're not supposed to do and swerved, and thankfully managed to keep the rear of the car content with it. I literally shaved that buck's ass. My mirror was folded in. I know you're not supposed to swerve, but I drive a tiny little thing, and that buck's body would have gone through my windshield into my and my wife's face at 70 miles per hour. Not me, but my friend. We were in a bar, and she was talking to a dude she met on Tinder. When she turned around I saw him put something into her beer. I walked up, pretended to stumble, and knocked it out of her hand. Apologized, told her I'd buy her next beer, and when we walked over to the bar I told her what he did. We left right after, decided to grab a case of beer, and play Mario Kart that night instead. I only tagged along, because she asked me to, which I'm always perfectly happy to do. Glad I did. A year ago, almost to the day, I was offered a new job. It was exactly what I was looking for, and was really excited. They told me they would email the contract, but after a week I hadn't had anything. After a lot of chasing they told me they'd change the structure of the organization, so the position wasn't available. I have a month's notice for my current job, and if I had taken the job my notice period would have been after the cutoff date for furlough in the UK. The new job was in an industry that collapsed through the pandemic, and the industry I work in has boomed. If I had received that email I would have probably been close to bankruptcy now. My first ever boyfriend dated me when I was 14 and he was 16. We only dated for 1 week before he took me into the woods and forced me to kiss him. I started to feel back icky and broke it off that same day. 5 years later I found out that he was now in prison for raping 2 14-year-old girls. That time I didn't go along for the ride when a friend of mine was running weed. Years ago, back when it was more illegal. I was bored and unemployed at the time and passed on this trip because I had to go to a job interview to be a zombie for Halloween festivities at an amusement park. I got the job, my friend got arrested and did 30 days in jail. Finishing up my paper route when I was a kid. Walking home on the sidewalk next to a busy road with sister on the inside, me dragging our little buggy on the outside. Middle of winter, car jumps the curb and takes out our buggy. Neither of us know what the hell had just happened other than the ungodly scraping sound, and that our buggy was gone. Find out later that the driver saw us run home scared and brought back our buggy, which was utterly destroyed in a crumpled heap. I was pulling the cart and my hand was on it, so I'm not sure how I avoided eating chrome that day. Not a single scratch on me. I still think about it regularly, and it's been over 30 years. Be sure to like and subscribe for more reading Reddit videos. Thanks, bye.